Exchange Rate Policy and Full Employment by Warren Mosler. Employment and Exchange Rate Policy. Russia has a massive unemployment and underemployment problem. With its fixed exchange rate regime, traditional demand management policy, such as increasing ruble deficit spending, simply resulted in an immediate loss of exchange reserves. Nor could interest rates be lowered by additional purchases of assets by the central bank, as any added rubles were immediately converted to US dollars at the central bank. Perhaps my suggestion of lowering the interest the Treasury would offer to pay on GKOs would have sufficiently cut ruble spending, but that was not a consideration. The only way the peg could be sustained was through increased US dollar contributions from foreign entities. In theory, stability could be reached when the US donated enough US dollars obtained by US deficit spending to inflate the US dollar at a rate equal to ruble inflation. Needless to say, that was not to happen. Today, with a floating ruble, Russia does have the ability to engage in traditional demand management policy. It could increase spending by paying market prices for goods and services. However, that has been tried and seems to lead to levels of inflation well beyond 100% annually. The price elasticity of items offered for sale seems to be very high, with what seem like small purchases driving up prices rapidly. Perhaps this is due to a truly limited capacity to expand output in the short run, and additionally, the limited capacity to enforce tax liabilities. Bill Mitchell's or Randy Wray's buffer stock employment model policy is, however, qualitatively very different from traditional demand management policy. With its unique form of full employment and price stability, it could very well instantly transform the Russian economy into something less miserable. Yes, corruption, waste, lack of legal structure, etc. would still be there, but nonetheless, life would likely be less miserable for much of the population. The important difference is that with the buffer stock employment program, a public service job is offered at an exogenously determined wage. Simply offering the buffer stock employment job at the prescribed wage accomplishes the mission regardless of the number of takers or the quantity of rubles spent. There is very real distinction between, on the one hand, paying a market-driven wage high enough to hire a given number of people by spending a given amount of rubles, and, on the other hand, simply offering the buffer stock employment wage and accepting whoever comes your way. The first can be highly inflationary, while the latter can never be inflationary beyond a one-time adjustment. Yes, this one-time adjustment could sharply lower the real buffer stock employment wage as determined by some index. However, that would represent the current market value of buffer stock employment labor sold to the government. The buffer stock employment wage could then be raised. However, it should be recognized that this would likely further devalue the currency with another one-time adjustment. With any tax-driven currency, the price level is a function of the prices paid by the government when it spends, and the collateral demanded when it lends. In other words, the price level is a function of what the government makes the taxpayers do to get the needed units of that currency. Note that Argentina, along with its currency board type of monetary rule, has outlawed public sector indexation. Inflation fell quickly, and the peg was able to be held politically. The electorate seemed to recognize that changing the nominal wage would not change the real wage. Unfortunately, they didn't realize ending indexation was sufficient, and they further added the currency board policy. I suggest economic performance suffered in Argentina because of the addition of the currency board after ending indexation, and suffered in Russia because of a failure to recognize the interest rate mechanism associated with a floating rate currency. In any case, should Russia select a combination of its current floating exchange rate regime and a buffer stock employment full employment policy, at least there would be a semblance of full employment, with the potential of real gains in needed output by the new public employees, and there would be at least the possibility of the emergence of the private sector as a functioning currency is reinstated. This should prove a major step forward from current policy, even without further institutional adjustment, though no doubt that would also be helpful, particularly tax reform and general legal structure. And it is entirely a local currency solution. No foreign involvement is required.